Oh yeah, it's my turn for the intro. Oops, I forgot.
Good start. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Hi. um, hello. Welcome to Script Notes. I am Navian, and I am here with my usual co-host Alejo.
Hi, Nivian. If you're watching this on YouTube, we're both laughing right now, but I probably edited out the reason why.
No, you can leave it in.
Okay.
Um, all right. So this week we are going back to our tier list. So when we initially made our tier list, this was like a little while back. It was really long, split into several episodes. Go back and watch it, if you want. But when we initially made this, we did not have all of the characters released yet. And there have been, aside from just new characters released, there have also been some changes to some character wordings. And some of them have been pretty substantial. Not all of them, but several of them are some decently big enough changes that they might, in fact, change where something fits in a tier list. So we are going to review our tier list. We've got a list of characters, both the ones that have changed abilities as well as ones that we have our own thoughts that maybe should be worth moving, as well as something from some feedback from our community members who disagree with where some of these positions are. So, yep, we're going to be going through these characters and seeing if they should be adjusted on the tier list at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I've posted a link to the playlist so that you can save that one for later if you've not rewatched it recently, and see if our opinions have changed or if the characters have changed. Yeah, should we get into it?
Yeah, let's go.
I've in our notes, I've highlighted everything that's had any kind of change. I don't think I've missed any. But the first one that you got is such a slight wording change that we're going to probably just leave it where it is and move on.
Yeah.
Uh, shall I talk about it then?
Yeah, you can go.
Alright, so the first character that whose ability has changed is going to be the Snitch. The old ability was minions start knowing three not in play characters. That's been changed to minions start knowing three bluffs. This with some of the clarifications that we've had on that, there is actually no mechanical change there. The bluffs can be, unlike demon bluffs, the bluffs can be they can be evil characters. So I don't think that there's any reason to change where the snitch is. It's still S tier. It still does everything you want an outsider to do.
Yeah, I agree that that was not one of the substantial changes. There's actually another character that, in my opinion, did not actually get a substantial change in its wording. And that one is Lil Monsta. So Lil Monsta now reads each night minions choose who babysits Lil Monsta and is the demon. Each night, asterisk, a player might die plus one minion. So the only change to Lil Monsta was that they added the word might into this. And in terms of mechanics, that did not change how Lil Monsta worked. It was always ruled that, like other abilities that say a player dies, that the ST chooses, you could sink that kill like into a dead or protected player if you wanted to. So like effectively you could always sink a little monster kill. The only time you would not be able to do that is if A, nobody is protected, and B, nobody is dead, then you would have had to kill. So in my opinion, it really just clarifies that like you can sink a little monster kill if you want to. And it's not that substantial of a change in terms of its mechanics. So I'm fine also with leaving Lil Monster where we put it initially.
I'm the only thing to really ask about Lil Monster is, do you think that any of the new minions change it because it is a minion centric character? Or even the clarification that Monk can protect during the day. Those are the only changes that we've really seen substantially that might affect it.
Technically, Monk's clarification was that it's intended
Yeah,
that like it would be able to if it hadn't been written for Trouble Brewing, but it was written for Trouble Brewing. So I think that's a little bit more wishy-washy on Monk's stuff, but I don't really think so. I mean, La Monsta getting even more minion options is like a plus for it, but all of those minions are still going to be Um, they still have their own personal uh drawbacks that they have. We've got minions kind of across the tier list, so I think having Low Monster in the B tier is a pretty solid spot for it still.
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy with that. Okay, next one up, we're going to be talking about the Boom Dandy. The Boom Dandy is another one that its change is mostly cosmetic. It's no longer a minute, it's now quicker, which I think just makes it a slightly stronger minion. But I don't think it has any changes in terms of other interactions. Like, I think that it's definitely a change to the mechanics, but I don't think it's a change that warrants discussion when it comes to script building. I think that
I agree.
Lord of Typhon is a character that you might not want to put it with too often, which is obviously a change since it was released. But I think that it's still in the right place in A tier, with an asterisk next to that, because we may discuss A tier a bit more later, depending on where the rest of
Yeah.
this discussion goes. Any thoughts on Bim Dandy?
No, I agree that, in terms of script building, that doesn't actually change pretty much anything about the Boom Dandy. Um, it makes it, again, a potentially slightly stronger character or a slightly weaker character, depending on what the storyteller thinks is needed for the game. But if the only thing you're changing is the countdown and not the actual fact that like everybody dies, then it's not a substantial enough change, in my opinion, to warrant movement.
Now, we've backloaded some of the major changes, but the next one to talk about, I think, is the most minor change of all, which is that we've had a clarification that the juggler cannot juggle the same thing twice.
That's true. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I did sort of vaguely forget about that. I was looking at our list and I was like, what change got made to Juggler?
Yep.
Because it's a published character. I'm like, the wording can't have changed it. Are we thinking of like the cannibal jinx? But it did gain a jinx with the cannibal as well that made it a
That's
slightly
true.
better, interaction with cannibal. Um, I don't really think it makes that substantial of a difference in terms of putting a role on a script, right? Like, okay, it's got a little bit better interaction with Cannibal, so it feels maybe a bit less bad to pair it with Cannibal now. But I don't think it's enough of a difference to move it in where its tier is placed.
And it was never a horrible interaction with Cannibal in the first place. It was a bit
Yeah,
but it wasn't game breaking. All right, do you want
yeah.
to talk about the next one then?
I,
We've done Little Monster.
I, yeah. So I do think that another kind of minor change is also the king. So the king went from being basically it always had an optional rule that if the dead either equal or outnumber the living, then that's when the king gets info. And it was sort of noted in its almanac, like this is the optional rule. It might be more fun when you have like an even player count, because you have a tendency to hit the equals. Um, and yeah, that just got like codified into its actual wording. Let me look at how it's so yeah, it just says each night if the dead equal or outnumber the living now. Again, it's a very minor change. I do think it makes it a better character. I always ran it with that optional rule anyway, because I have a tendency to run with even player count a lot. On Fridays we have our stream capped to 12, so we have 12 players a lot. um Again, it's good that it's codified. I think that does make it a better character. I'm not sure that it makes it better enough that it needs to change its placement.
Totally agree. Um, so we'll talk about the Leviathan, which hasn't had a change per se. It's kind of in the same bracket as Monk in that it's had a we're questioning whether or not there's been a bit of an ambiguous change, shall we say, to Leviathan, regarding whether or not it's you need to hear announcements. But it has also changed quite significantly in terms of its jinxes. And I
Yeah.
think that the new jinxes are significantly better than the old ones, although they're still not ideal. But there are
The
some of
bar
them.
was not very high for
It
that.
wasn't. So I think that in terms of script building, Leviathan is now definitely better than it was when we originally did this. I don't know that it's enough to get it into the B tier. but I think that it's now top of C tier. There are still some jinxes that
Yeah,
don't play great.
yeah, I can agree with that. I think that while the jinxes are improvements, I'm still not like thrilled with them, and that's in part because like these abilities just kind of don't really fit together very well. You know, some of those abilities that it's jinxed with, like soldier and innkeeper, monk, that kind of stuff. Their jinxes are now largely that they're safe from all evil abilities, meaning they're now safe from minion abilities as well. I think those are, they're an improvement. They don't get me excited. And then there's the jinxes where, for things that like Raven Keeper and Sage and Farmer, where Banshee as well, I believe, the Leviathan each night chooses a good player. I think it initially wasn't just a good player, and it was sort of pointed out that like, oh well, they can just like keep pinging between, the evil players and never have to worry about proccing that. So they changed it to be you have to pick a good player, a different from last night. And if they're one of those roles, then their ability functions. I can't remember whether they die or not. I think they don't die,
I
but
do not.
their ability functions. But they're weird, they're awkward. I actually think maybe I liked those ones jinxes previously, where if they got executed, like so they had a price for it, right? They had to get executed to get their ability to function. And if the person who nominated them was good, then they would be drunk. I think I liked those ones actually a little bit better, but I still think that overall these jinxes are kind of weird, awkward. You're mostly better off just not pairing these things together, meaning that I think Leviathan just still stays in C tier. Some improvement, not enough to move it.
Yeah, there's a fair bit of appreciation in chat for the King Jinx, which definitely makes King a lot more playable with Leviathan. Um,
Oh, yeah, I definitely can agree with that. I do
fuck.
like the King Jinx with Leviathan now.
Sorry, I dropped something on. But yeah, I think that the one thing I do like about it, although not from a script building perspective, is that now the Ravenkeeper can learn info on the first night of the game. Isn't that fun?
I I guess.
Okay. Yeah, next character. I think. Do you want to go on?
Yeah, are those all of our like minor
I think so. Yeah.
changes?
I think that the next one, the first one that I've got listed after Little Monster, is also a moderate change, shall we say?
Okay, yeah, well then let's go ahead with Plague Doctor. So Plague Doctor was originally when you die, the storyteller gains a not in play minion ability, and it now is just the storyteller gains a minion ability, meaning that you can now have double abilities in play. Um, I think that is a pretty fun change. I think it definitely opens up the possibility space and it makes it even more of an outsider. It so part of the problem with Plague Doctor on scripts and part of why it's a little bit lower in the tier list is, well, first of all, again, like Little Monster, it's very minion centric and the minions do kind of span our tier list. But two is that when it had to be a not in play minion ability, it maybe limited your options, especially in terms of like louder minions. Like it could be really obvious if after the plague doctor died, if the only thing out of play was like a vizier, you suddenly had to announce yourself as the vizier, right? um and now since you can double up on minion abilities, you don't have to take the route where you are hard confirming a plague doctor necessarily. You could pick a quieter minion. You could, double up on poisons if the evil team is really struggling. I think that it's definitely an improvement. um, Not 100% sure if it's an improvement enough to bump it out of B tier, but maybe it is. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's moved definitely to the peak of B tier, if not the bottom of A tier. Um, the the fact that you no longer have to worry about, okay, so does every minion ability on here work with the Plague Doctor? I think is a significant change. Um, you still do need to have
Mhm.
ideally two or three that you can happily give, because otherwise, like you
Yeah,
don't want the Plague Doctor to go, oh, I'm dead. Guess the storyteller has gained the Serenovus ability then, because it was either that or
right.
Vizier. um, mastermind or, I don't know, psychopath. And obviously none of those are in play.
Right. Yeah. I
So
agree. I think that even though you can double up on abilities, you still want to have as many minion abilities that it would make sense for a storyteller to have as possible.
yeah. Um, I don't know. I don't find it that hard to put Plague Doctor on scripts, but that might be because recently I've built so many wizard scripts, and that's just a hilarious combination that I love. But yeah, I think it's definitely significantly stronger for such a fairly minor change, but I don't know, is it enough to go into A tier? It's definitely on that line. What do you think, chat? Let us know what you think. And maybe we'll move it up, maybe we won't.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's kind of on the line. I would put it in like a really high B tier, but I don't think I would bump it up to A tier. It's pretty close though. Like I could be persuaded if enough people tell me, no, no, it's A tier now. I could be
So
easily influenced here.
so I guess the closest comparison in A tier we've got is Hatter. Is it harder to script build with than Hatter now? Or do we need to look at where Hatter is?
Um, Yeah, maybe we need to look where Hatter is because, like, I think Hatter's going to suffer from some of the similar issues that you might have with Plague Doctor, right? So, like, Hatter, you might want to be careful with something like a Mezophiles on the script, and now it needs a Spirit of Ivory, right? If you have a Plague Doctor Mez, then it's technically under the storyteller's control, and you could easily just not give the word out if there is a Mezophiles already in play, or just give yourself a different ability that's not a Mez, right? But it is something that the players are going to have to consider with the change, because it is like mechanically viable. Therefore, you might have to start adding SOIs on a script just to assure your players, like, I'm not going to do this to you. Um, and so maybe Hatter needs a second, more scrutinous look.
Um, well, we've not got it down. Do we want to jump ahead and do that now, or should we make a note of it? I can. Yeah, I'll make a note of it.
I think we might as well do it now
Okay.
since we're sort of talking about them and comparing and contrasting Hatter versus Plague Doctor pitfalls.
Sure. So Hatter we put in the A tier. Um, with the note that we weren't really sure which Hatter we were getting, and we're still not really sure which Hatter we're getting. I
True.
think,
I mean, we sort of got a bit of both, right? It's an optional rule that you can have a Mad Hatter where demons and minions can swap places.
yeah. Um, I think that the Hatter also interacts with demons, so the demons can switch about. Um, I don't know if I don't know why we put Hatter in A. I feel like Hatter belongs alongside the Plague Doctor in B, to be honest, at the moment. But I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
maybe my thoughts on that will
I'm
change.
willing to accept that. Like, uh, there's some minion abilities too now that like maybe make Hatter a little bit harder to deal with. So, for
That's
example,
true.
Summoner Hatter is not like great. Wizard Hatter, resulting in multiple wizard wishes or having to put. I mean, technically, a wizard could sort of contrive to try to make that happen regardless, and you always have to potentially be ready to put a stop to multiple wishes. Um, with nothing else on the script other than wizard. But how to think things that like encourage people to change their characters like that. Not necessarily uh, a positive to Hatter now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's our first change then. So there we go. We're going to now. We're now getting into the slightly more significant changes. I'd say there are three characters who are basically entirely new characters that we'll come back to, but I think we've still got two we can talk about before that. So I think the next one to talk about is going to be the Lycanthrope, which does two things
Yeah.
different. It now only replaces demon kills, so all other sources of death are still a thing. And it causes somebody to register as evil to everybody, including itself, but not just itself. So,
Hmm.
but it is worth noting that is only evil, not as a minion or as a demon.
Yeah, definitely worth noting that. Now, yeah, we're starting to get into um, substantial changes now because this is a pretty big change. I, I don't know if it makes Lycanthrope better. It does make it different. Um, it certainly at least cuts out some awkward bad role interactions like gossip or the weird gambler jinx that it had that was always just sort of a bit questionable. So it does smooth out some of these interactions, but the global misregistration is a pretty big detraction to it that I've not experienced a lot of it because people still don't like lycanthrope. It's still not that fun for a lot of people. Um, but in my experience, it has not always been a good or fun thing to have a global misregistration from the lycanthrope ability like that. Uh, we have had clarification that it doesn't result in the wrong team winning, essentially, if you were to make things like the Saint or uh, a fearmonger target is the faux pas or whatever. So like at least it doesn't work really, really badly with things that can detect alignment with regards to like game ending stuff, except it's still awkward with Klutz. Because all of the other ones, they basically said that like the game ends, the faux pas misregistration turns off, and then the winner is determined.
Yeah, but that doesn't work for Klutz because
Matter for
yeah,
things like Mayor, Saint, whatever. But Klutz, the alignment of the player matters to determine whether the game ends or not. So I think it's still really weird and awkward with Klutz, and I don't like it there. There's not really a good way to rule that, in my opinion. Um, I've seen it result in some kind of unfun games. I think it didn't pair well with a fearmonger in a game that I played where literally all of the information said, "Hey, this player is evil." And so the fearmonger had a very obvious choice on who to pick because that player was gonna get executed. But because the faux pas doesn't change what team actually wins for the fearmonger there, then it was just like a kind of not too difficult to get evil win when usually fearmonger is a much more difficult to try to work through. So eh,
I do
I
think
don't.
I do think that there are some cases where it is quite interesting though, particularly if you've got like I feel like the Oracle is a character that it works quite nicely with because the Oracle can it gives a little bit more misinfo, but the Oracle can use it to figure out who the faux pas is. Um, I think that there are characters. The fact that it doesn't interact with character type means that you can have
Mhm.
combining info like an empath evil ping and a washerwoman townsfolk ping that can sort of mitigate each other. That can lead to some interesting puzzles. I think that it works with
Mhm.
quite a few other characters that can make the choice for themselves, like artist and seamstress. I think there are some little weird edge cases, um, like you say, fearmonger. Ogre is another one. Are they jinxed actually? I don't think they are.
Uh, no, not as far as I know.
Um, so that's a bit of a silly one. Cannibal could be interesting. I think that there are enough cases where it does do something that nothing else will really do. That it provides
Hmm.
something new to script builders that they've not seen before. Um, Emma says that it's now still not fun and also um, more vulnerable to bad storytelling, but fortunately, those aren't criteria that we're judging on.
It's true.
So I personally think that this is now definitely not D tier. I think it's mid C tier.
Yeah, I definitely can agree that like it does smooth out a lot of its most like weird and awkward interactions with some of these other good roles, in particular the multi-kill roles, right? So I'm happy to move it up out of D tier. I don't think it's D tier anymore. I still think that it requires some very careful script building to still help it to work. And it again, also it does require some pretty good storytelling to know who to make the faux pas, but that's not our requirement here. Yeah, I think it's still got enough awkward um interactions, including with class. And again, like, so the win-loss condition stuff, like, I agree with how it's been ruled, but I think that that's not an intuitive ruling. And I think that is worth considering when you are building a script, is like how, like, if this has weird rulings and weird edge cases, how intuitively could somebody get there if they weren't, for example, up to date on the Discord rulings. So, I think that's worth considering in terms of like script building requirements as well. And I think that those being not intuitive do mean that it still definitely has quite a lot of awkward. So like I would put it in a low C tier personally, but you know,
Yeah. At least we agreed on the tier then.
yeah.
Okay. I think the next one is yours to lead with. I'd probably go for the first one again, but it's up to you which one you want to talk about next.
Yeah, so we can go ahead and talk about Monkey,
Okay, yeah.
Organ Grinder. So Organ Grinder's change is also decently substantial. It's not as substantial as I think some of the upcoming changes will be, but it's a pretty big change. Basically, the organ grinder can now choose whether they are drunk each night, and essentially just shut their character ability off. They can do this to either hide that there is an organ grinder in play from the beginning, or they can do it mid game to try to frame somebody, do a surprise late game organ grinder. In my personal experience, quite a lot of people just don't give themselves an ability, and then they get executed because people figure out that they're evil, so they just like have no impact on the game. So I strongly implore people to use your ability. Same call goes out to viziers. But the question is, what does this do for the character? So it has also lost its ability to survive execution without like uh, they no longer have to vote for themselves for an execution to count. So they lost their survivability. I hate this change.
I agree.
However, that's not a criteria for what we're looking at. What does this do for script building?
Yeah, basically. I agree with all of that. I think that old Organ Grinder was a lot more fun, but I think that there is an argument that this is, based off the reasons that we put it in C tier last time, easier to build with.
Um, yeah, it no longer necessarily has to be a super allowed minion. Um, I don't know. I don't know if the changes actually change it for me. Can you convince me?
Okay. So Organ Grinder, the one thing that it does now is that it means that while the organ grinder is alive, they can choose whether or not people's eyes are open or closed, right? Basically. Um,
Hmm.
what bad interactions does that have? I suppose is my question.
Uh, well, actually, I think it now continues to have a bad interaction with Flower Girl. It previously had a jinx that at the very least you got some sort of social information. So the jinx previously with Flower Girl was that if the organ grinder was causing eyes closed voting, the Flower Girl learned how many times the demon voted. And I think that that told the good team, it told the Flower Girl something, right? Like if there were 5 nominations and then you learned that the demon voted 5 times, then you can probably surmise that none of those players were the demon who got nominated, right? You can gain some social information from that Jinx. And then it got changed to a worse Jinx. I don't remember what it was, but I remember really disliking the new Jinx that they tried out. And then the Jinx got removed entirely instead of reverting back to the previous one. I preferred the previous one to anything, and now it's just like a piss poor interaction. I mean, if you give yourself no ability, then it's just a normal Flower Girl. But if you give yourself an ability, it's like for the Flower Girl that still doesn't pair well with an Organ Grinder who is doing something.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think that Flower Girl is still going to be a problem with Organ Grinder, but Flower Girl itself we put in the B tier. So I think there's an argument to be made that that is a problem in both directions. That the Flower Girl has a bad interaction with the Organ Grinder just as much as Organ Grinder does with Flower Girl. But Flower Girl also has a bunch of other bad interactions, namely, can you use it effectively if you don't have something like a Vortox on script? It doesn't pair well with quite a few demons. Maybe if you have a Shabloth or something like that to really be able
Yeah,
to
but
sell
that's
it.
Flower Girl. This is Organ Grinder. Organ Grinder has a pretty bad interaction with Flower Girl. That was the question.
But that means if Organ Grinder only has a bad interaction with Flower Girl, then the Flower Girl should be the absolute floor for where it is. So, unless we think that we need to lower Flower Girl again, I think Organ Grinder deserves to be higher. Like, we have characters in S tier who have bad interactions with one character, or maybe a handful
Yeah.
of characters. So, while I think that the absolute never put these two characters together certainly keeps Organ Grinder out of the S tier, I honestly don't see a reason why it can't be A tier, let alone B.
I'm very resistant because I hate the change to it so much. So,
I know, but look where we put Evil Twin, and you know how much you love
yeah, I
that.
know. I know. It just, Organ Grinder went from being like one of my favorite minions to just like, just 90% of the time I see people choose to be drunk now. And it's just like, it's not fun. It's not interesting. I know that those are not the criteria on our tier list here. It's just for script building. In terms of script building, let's see. Okay. So it doesn't work great with Flower Girl. Is there anything else that um it doesn't work well with? Okay, so maybe it'll help if you remind me of the reasons that we put it in C tier.
I think one of the main reasons we put it in C tier, which is no longer a factor, is that it's an unkillable minion. The good team could not deal with it, and now they can.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah. Um, yeah, that was its like main limiting factor, is that you have to be wary of that, and especially scripts where maybe you have like extra evils, right? Because then you run into the issue where you have too many living evils. It's easier to get that living evil majority when you have somebody who like literally just can't die unless the evil team wants them to. That's definitely less of a problem now. Um, which I guess moves it up, right?
There is the case to be made that that we have in chat that um, it's if it chooses to be drunk or chooses not to be drunk, it's obvious that it's in play, which means that the good team will have an easier time figuring out which minions are in play. This is something that we're going to be talking about later with the Fearmonger.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we can talk a little bit more about that later, but I personally don't think that that's really an issue. But I'll get more into why later.
I would argue that a character being unfun makes it very hard to script build with. Yeah, so we've discussed this in the past, and I think the conclusion we came to was what one person finds fun is not going to be the same as what another person finds fun, and we kind of want to avoid assuming that people aren't going to find things fun because we don't, and because people that we talk to
Yeah.
don't. Um,
I also think that like finding a character unfun makes it unpopular to script build with, which is
yeah,
not always the same thing as difficult to script build with. I almost never put Evil Twin on my scripts because I fucking hate it. that doesn't mean I actually would have a difficult time mechanically fitting it in somewhere. I simply choose not to because I don't like it. I find it unfun to both play and as a result script build with. But that's like a me problem and not a character problem.
Yeah, I think the argument, and we, like I said, we will get into this, that a character is loud means that you couldn't. It's quite easy to build. It's quite possible to build a script where the good team needs to figure out whether it's if the good team can figure out whether X minion is in play, then they can do a lot better. Like, is there a goblin in play? Well, no, because it's a 1 minion game and we just had our eyes closed. So that player is probably either the Organ Grinder or the demon. I do think that those factors that we've talked about keep it out of being S tier for sure and high A tier. I still think it's low A tier. But what do you think, chat? We've got. I know that a lot of people don't like the change, and I know that it feels bad to go. Okay, we've made this character less fun. Let's move it up the tier list. But I think it.
It really does feel bad to do that, but
But
like I think you're right. Like, by removing the survivability aspect of it, which in my opinion made it a good and fun and strong and interesting character. Yes, it limited its script building abilities as a result, but that's part of why I liked it that hard. Um, so yes, it's removed the part for me that is one of the most fun and interesting aspects of it, and as a result has in fact gotten more script versatility. um I still think, it can have some of the issues of being a pretty loud minion, but again, I don't think that is too limiting of a factor for me. uh Molly wants to argue for it being in the DEF tier, which is the uncharacter tier. Um, I know what the argument is. The argument is that because 90% of the time players are now choosing to simply drunk themselves, they have no ability, therefore the character is essentially non-existent anymore.
we have another character we were joking about putting in that tier.
I think we were, but I can't remember what it
I can't
was.
remember what it was either.
Anyway, I do think that unfortunately I have to agree that in terms of like script building ease, uh
What was Wizard?
Oregon Grinder has to move up here and I don't like it.
Okay, the only question then is how high. So let's get. Oh, my poll website broke.
Oh no.
No.
I do agree with Scorpion in the chat here, which is that the survivability made it easier to script build with for them because it was great with like BMR style scripts in that, it could cause some like ambiguity about execution stuff. Um I'm not sure that that's actually true because Organ Grinder, uh, like the vote not working and nobody being executed doesn't look the same as somebody surviving an execution. So I don't think that was ever true, actually.
Okay, well we'll do a poll, and please remember. I know we say this every time, but for this one we have to absolutely stress it because we both prefer the old version too. The question is, how good is it to script build with? I do think that there is an argument to say that um, it's the survivability gave it something unique, and that is kind of the other side of the coin that we do judge things on. So it has lost that. That is a
Yeah.
fair case.
Yeah. I mean, I'd put it in B tier personally. I can understand that some of that might just be resistance because I dislike the change so much.
Uh, I can I can agree with B.
Emma says unfakeability is a negative for script building. I mean, that's fair, I guess, but
Okay, I think
I
we're
don't think I disagree with how much of a negative it is, as Emma does, I guess, is what I'm saying.
well. Good news, everybody, because we're going to talk about a character that can fake it. because we have not yet touched on the Alchemist and the Alchemist's new ability, which
That's been
is
a pretty substantial change.
also. I mean, we're keeping it controversial here. The Alchemist's new ability is that it can duplicate an in-play character now, and also the storyteller gets to say no. You want to kick us off with this
Yep.
one?
Yeah. So
Just say no. Alchemist, not even once.
it's definitely a choice that has been made here. So one of the choices, probably the less controversial choice, was the change from making it an out of play minion ability to just a minion ability, meaning that alchemists can now also double up. I'm not gonna lie, I ran an alchemist script I don't know, maybe like a week or so ago, and I just 100% forgot that that was a change that got made to Alchemist. And I was running it as old Alchemist, and I turned a damsel who got picked by a huntsman into an Alchemist and gave them an ability, being like, actually, this is really useful for them to know is out of play. Completely forgetting in that moment that nope, it's no longer an out of play minion ability. This was not actually helpful. I apologized to the player after the game because I realized it like partway through the rest of the game. I was like, wait a minute.
Please tell me it wasn't
So
Mastermind.
yeah, it was not.
Okay.
I think I gave the damsel turned alchemist the boom dandy ability to be like, hey, you don't have to worry about executions here, or you can set yourself off at some point if you think that like it would be more useful. But mostly I wanted them to be like, you don't have to worry about who you kill here, completely forgetting that like, no, actually this could just double up now. Rip. So uh I understand that the message that we got when that change happened was basically that like the not in play aspect, which is something that's useful for the good team to know, it helps to limit and narrow worlds. That was not necessarily ever an intended aspect of the alchemist ability. It was really just about the fun of giving a good player minion ability, because that's fun. And it wasn't necessarily initially intended to be about having the extra meta info of what the evil team was composed of. So I understand that change. I personally liked the I liked the not in play aspect, because I thought it contributed to the puzzle and solving the puzzle. But I'm not like that, I don't really feel that strongly about the change being made to being able to double up on abilities. That maybe makes it, again, a bit more versatile, similar to like Plague Doctor, where uh, now the storyteller has more choices potentially open to them, and that does make it a little bit more versatile. Um, the controversy comes in the other side of it, which is uh, the exact wording on that is when using this, the storyteller may prompt you to choose differently. And that's a really tricky thing to storytell, which again is not our main criteria here. In fact, we're not generally even thinking how hard is this to storytell at all, because that's a different issue from script building. But I think some abilities are significantly more likely to have to get told that in order to not just suddenly end the game, um, than other abilities are, right? I still think that Alchemist still has its issues with certain abilities wherein they're either going to be overpowered. Like this was sort of like the answer to Alchemist can't be paired with certain abilities because they might become overpowered and it's like not fun, right? Alchemist Poisoner, who manages to find the demon and just poison locks the demon, is just like an exorcist that the evil team can't do shit about. Um, Maybe they can now because maybe now you have an actual poisoner in play, but then you have to question how fun or good is it to actually have two poisoners in the game. Yes, one of them is going to be looking for evils to target, but a lot of times they're going to hit good players in the process. Like I still think that even with this change, I still think Alchemist has quite a lot of issues, and I'm not sure how well it actually smooths those issues out versus just makes them into different issues. Yeah.
I completely agree. I think that for everything that this does helpful, it does something less helpful. And I think it is in the right place.
Yeah, I'm happy to leave it where it is. I still think most of the minions that it would have had issues with before, that is being quote unquote solved by the storyteller can just tell you to choose again, which I don't actually think is a good solution.
Yeah. But just as a bonus round, what's the funniest thing that a storyteller can tell an alchemist not to do?
Oh, well, it's got to be like psychopath vizier stuff, right? This person dies. No, they don't.
Uh, Hear me out.
Oh, claim goblin. Yeah,
Yeah,
claim
claim
goblin. No,
goblin. No,
you
you
didn't.
don't. Point to somebody else after they've exploded as the Boon Dandy.
What do you mean?
I mean, it's their ability that's causing them to point, right? So they're pointing at the demon, and the storyteller just says, "Would you mind pointing at
Oh,
someone
point
else,
to
please?"
somebody else. Oh my goodness. Yeah, yeah, these are all definitely just like things that could happen.
if you if you as the alchemist witch curse yourself and then nominate, can the storyteller prompt you not to nominate?
I mean, I don't know. I feel like does the prompt have to be at the point where you make your choice as the witch, or can they just say, no, you can't nominate? Because I feel like with the witch ability, it would have to be at the point where they pick their witch curse. But you can't stop the nomination once you let the witch curse happen. But I could definitely see an argument
So it just says
for the
when
other reason.
using this, which is I don't know.
Yeah, but the nomination itself isn't using the minion ability. It's
But
procking the minion ability, but not using it.
but the soldier would be safe from the witch carrying little monster if they tried to nominate, because they would be using the minion slash demon.
Well, they would be safe from the death, but they could still nominate.
Okay. Much
But
to
yeah,
think
I
about.
definitely think that it creates its own type of like different wonkiness than Old Alchemist might have had. And I'm not sure that it's better. It's just different.
C tier.
I'm happy to leave it where it's at.
All right, we've got two more characters with new abilities to talk about. Which one do you want to do first?
Um, let's go with Balloonist. We'll save
Balloonist.
maybe one of the biggest changes for last. I mean, Balloonist is a pretty substantial change. Don't get me wrong.
And I think everyone in chat knows what's coming next. Then, and I want you to say
Yeah.
because if you mention something that we've forgotten, that would be great. But yeah, Balloonist. It's now a very different character. It used
Hmm.
to learn one player of each character type, which meant that it would be guaranteed to learn the demon after the fourth night and knows it's one of four players. It now just learns somebody different to previously. It used to add an outsider, now that's a might. I think that the old balloonist was broadly it was broadly something that was useful in or a Leviathan script, maybe a smaller game.
Hmm.
In bigger games, it would narrow the demon down quite aggressively, and to be fair, in smaller games, it would usually just die before it got any useful information. Now it still can
Right.
just die before it gets any useful information, um, but it can no longer, if the storyteller doesn't want it to, it can no longer be a negative for its team. Its ability can no longer be +1 outsider. I mean, it can, but only if the storyteller allows that to be the case. I
I mean,
think
I would have argued that that was not a negative for its own team. Yes, it adds an outsider, but it did make the outsider count pretty like in most scripts, unless there was quite a lot of other outsider mods. It made outsider count knowable and trackable by the good team really easily, which is actually a quite strong positive for their team.
yeah, it depends on what else is on the script for sure.
It
Um,
can, yeah.
like if you, yeah, it's not it wasn't as helpful for that in say catfishing as it was in say bluff.
Yeah, it definitely depended on script design, but a lot of the times I found the +1 outsider to be a positive for its team, but not in a good way. It was a positive for its team in a way that was like, this is often like too strong.
But now, so I think that one of the key reasons behind the change was to give it a bit more Droizen resilience. And I know that
Yeah.
I know that you're I know that we have some minor disagreements on this, but I think it's kind of succeeded at that.
No, I do agree that it succeeded. The only difference was where how poison brittle it was initially, and I
Right.
personally never thought it was as bad as many other people treated it. Um, but I do agree that regardless of how you felt about its initial like how susceptible it was towards poisoning initially, that it is definitely an improvement from that aspect. In terms of storytelling, I think that it's a lot easier to give like not great info, but again, the like how well can this be story told is not an aspect that we are looking at. In terms of script building, yeah, I think it moves up to tier because it definitely is more survivable with poison stuff.
Yeah, the outside mob being too confirmatory and the demon being too narrowed. I think again, outside of mod depends on a lot of things. It's certainly the case that a balloonist can be trusted if there's an outsider with no other reason for there to be an outsider. That's still the case. If you're playing a game and you have way more outsiders than you're expecting, the balloonist is probably real, and they probably added one of them.
Yeah,
Um,
I actually think that like I understand that the +0 to +1 outsider is makes it a lot more questionable in terms of the outsider count. I do think that it is still necessary for a balloonist to have potential outsider mod because if you're in a base zero game and the only thing in there is a balloonist, then I think generally you add an outsider. Um, but I understand why people think that it's now a downside to it. I don't mind that it's a downside. If it's a downside, then you need a storyteller who knows how to storytell balloonist well and will actually give you useful information. That I think is kind of the point of that character and the combination with its like potential downside, right? I agree that like just being a +1 was oftentimes way too confirmatory. So I prefer the change the +0 to +1. I don't necessarily prefer the change to how the main aspect of its ability works, but I think it's fine in the right hands. And in terms of again, in terms of like script building and versatility, I think it definitely should go up a tier. Maybe even 2 tiers. I don't know. What do you think?
uh, I think I think it still has a lot of the same problems that it used to, but less so. I think that it's. I do think
Hmm.
it's a tier higher now. I think it's low to middle of B
Okay.
tier. Do you want to make the case for A? See if you can convince me.
I guess the case for A would be okay. Well, what does it work poorly with now? Um, the outsider modification on itself is already somewhat arbitrary, so you no longer have to worry about how it might combine with other outsider modification as much anymore. Um, it does survive through poison quite a bit better. It's still not like amazing necessarily, but it is significantly better than it was before from most people's perspective. Again, for me, it's only a bit better, but like for a lot of people, they could view that as a pretty significantly better change. What does it work poorly with?
I'd argue it's
Yeah, it's still quite bad with
it's
Vortox
still
for
bad with
sure.
Vortox, yeah, definitely. Um, I'd argue that it's probably not a character that you would want to play on a script which has a lot of death because it's a character that really wants to get info over a longer period of time. It's still vulnerable in Shabaloth or Assassin or whatever scripts to being you start knowing that the
Yeah,
player
that's
is
fair.
playing. Um, I I don't love
That's
the
fair. Yeah.
balloonist. It's not my favorite character, so I accept that maybe I'm doing the thing now where I'm like I don't want to put it in A because it's not my favorite character. Um, yeah, you
I
make
mean, it's fine. We can put it in B.
Okay, sure. Balloonist, moving up.
B is for balloonist.
B is for balloonist. Hell yeah. And that leaves us with one character left in this tier to talk about, unless we've missed something. If we've missed something, please tell us. But the most significant
Oh,
change.
we didn't talk about Harpy.
Oh, we didn't talk about Harpy. You're right. We skipped over
We did
Harpy.
miss one.
We did miss one. Harpy can, compared to when we originally talked about it, it can now only kill one person instead of both of them.
Yep, this should have gone in our more like minor change section of these character change ability changes, but yep, we missed it.
I don't think that changes anything. It arguably makes it more versatile than we've currently got it in S. I suppose
Yeah, I agree. It gets to stay there.
I suppose there's a case where that, as we have with Fearmonger in particular, that it's now even more visible. But
Yeah, I mean, we also have things that have been released since then that, well, particularly Yagababble, right? Yagababble can cause day deaths, and now that you have the option
That's
with
true.
Harpy to only kill one of them, they can kind of potentially mimic each other. It's just even more versatile than it was before. Uh, cool. I guess to say it S. All right.
But yeah, the biggest change to a character's ability that we've seen is the bit of the specialist role, as used to be. Is it still that? Maybe we'll talk about it. Is our good buddy Riot over here, which is a completely new character now. It used to be that all nominations led to Riot deaths. Now it's only on day 3, and it now has minions. Yeah, what do you think about it?
Uh, I think that high stakes betting is in shambles. It is on the floor, rolling around, crying, shaking, vomiting, etc.
Sure is.
Uh,
It needs some minions.
very sad change for high stakes betting, which definitely only functions as an old Riot script.
Yeah. Uh,
So yeah, very very big change to how this works.
we did miss one. Thank you, Emma. And it is the biggest change.
Oh my God, Acrobat. Yep, we do keep missing them.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about Acrobat after this then. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go
Was
ahead.
Acrobat even in our list?
Nope,
I
it's
think we
not.
just completely missed
We
Acrobat
did.
entirely.
We absolutely did.
Oh well.
But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so uh Riot now gets minions, which means that for the first couple of days of the game, even potentially into some of day 3 as well, because you can change their minion abilities, the minions into Riot at any point before nominations on day 3. So anywhere from the start of night 3 into right when nominations happen on day 3. So oh yeah, I'll have changed as well. Sorry, yeah. Thanks, chat. We're missing a bunch here apparently.
We know how
There's
to
been
do
a
our
lot of
jobs.
changes since we first did this tier list. So um yeah, you can have minion activity for the first 2 to 3 days. That minion activity can potentially be loud, so you can, I mean, you know that it always starts as like not a riot game in the sense of riot nominations happening. But I think it's useful depending on what you pair it with. It may not necessarily be like confirmed as a riot game just based on the fact that people don't die in the night. Because it still doesn't cause any deaths in the night. It is still a non-killing demon. But you can pair that with either minions that can kill or good abilities that can kill to help cover that it's not that it's a riot game. You could pair it with things like summoner or the protection roles to be like, okay, that's why nobody died in the night. You can put a lycanthrope on. There's a few things that you can do to help cover the fact that riot doesn't kill until day 3, where it starts off the riot nominations like usual. They did decide to take off the after day 3 evil wins clause. I think that might have been for it might have been for like token text reasons. I'm not 100% sure why that got taken off. I think it was not a good thing to take that off because it does actually make Riot a bit more awkward with anything that could cause. So like, I mean, not that Riot Virgin was ever a good combo, but if you have a Virgin and a Riot script now, and for some reason they don't go off in the first 2 days, on day three, they could purposely try to not get nominated so that on day three they can cause an execution and then the game just like continues indefinitely.
Yeah. I so what's your takeaway then for in terms of its tier list?
Um, so I think that you still need to write a script with Riot in mind because you're still going to have the majority of people getting information for the first 2 days and then a uh sudden like then an end to the game. So you still want to give the good team enough stuff that they can potentially work through something in the first 2 days to get to where their evils are in time. Um, so I still think that it needs to have a carefully crafted script, but the fact that you now have minion abilities added in, I think does give it more interest. So I'd be willing to bump it up a tier, but I wouldn't bump it up too high. I would just put it in C tier now, I think.
I do think C tier is the absolute cap and low C tier at that. I think that it works if you can put it with characters that are going to cause kills or demons that are quieter. Maybe even Alhad, now that we're talking about that. It's still a bit funky with Summoner. You'd think that that's a
Hmm.
logical pairing, and it kind of is. That although it does just create a demon that you previously would have had no idea where it is on final day. Um,
Right. Which
so
does make it maybe not the best choice. It like Summoner helps cover up why there's no deaths, but it could be pretty rough on that final day, yeah.
still think it's a bit of a niche tool, but I think it's a niche tool that's no worse at being a niche tool. Um, and
Hmm.
honestly, I would be hard pressed to almost ever put it into a script. I feel like I would have to go out of my way to do so. So I'm inclined to leave it where it is. I think it's slightly better, but is it a tier better? I don't know, maybe. Um, if you think C, I think it's D. Let's ask. Should we ask the people what they think?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I wouldn't be like unhappy if we decide that it stays in D. I just want to recognize that like I think that getting minion activity involved with Riot is probably a positive change.
Yeah,
And overall, it largely so okay. One of the struggles with writing a Riot script previously was the fact that like as soon as nominations happen, even on day one, day two, people are going to be dying, and that means less information for the good team. That no longer happens, which means more information for the good team, which I think does mean that you don't have to front load your script with as many like this acts immediately kind of information roles, which is the biggest reason that I would move it up a tier.
yeah. I think that Riot, and All Riot in particular, is the best argument for being in a low tier doesn't necessarily make it a bad character because like Riot was never supposed to be a character that plays nice with other characters. It was its own thing.
Yeah,
Garden of Sin,
right.
go away. Um, but I do think it's a lot better. But I think it was so bad before that it is where it is. Although
I mean, yeah, that's fair. Like if we decide it's like a high D now, that's fine. Like I would have put it in a low C if it does get moved up at all. But I could accept a
yeah,
like a high D tier.
I'm not dead set against a low D. Sorry, low C. So go vote. You got 2 minutes. I suppose we should probably fill in the two that we didn't talk about then, which are
Yeah,
Al
although I'm not
Hadikia.
100% sure if Leech had changed before we originally talked about it.
I thought it had.
I I can't remember. Where did we put Leech anyway? We'll just look at it real quick just in case.
Sure. Um,
We put Leech in C tier. I'm not gonna lie. I think the change doesn't substantially change where it's tier list, where it is tier anyway. You don't have to worry about immortal leech issues as much, but like that was always an optional rule that you should have, you should have already been running anyway. So like C tier is fine for it.
Yeah. Um,
Yes, we did it. We did do lycanthrope changes.
I may or may not have updated this stream title. This is probably going to go into two parts at least, because we've got a lot of characters to talk about.
True. We're like not quite halfway through our list and we're an hour in. So
Yeah.
yeah, we should probably split it into two.
So let's talk about Al Hadikia. Very minor change. It can now choose not to kill. That is a minor change on paper. In practice, it allows Al Hadikia to hide a bit better. But also in practice, I don't think I will ever see an Al Hadikia choose not to attack. Except in the weirdest situation.
Yeah, I think the biggest reason to do that is maybe if it's like paired with a summoner on the script and you want to make it look like it's a summoner game.
I guess.
Um, I don't see a whole lot of reason to do that. I guess maybe it can now go with like abilities that would so like it could go with exorcist a little bit better because you could that could just be an evil person bluffing. It goes with maybe like goon better because again it could just be evil bluffing. I don't think that it is a great change, and I don't think it changes where I would put Alhead.
I agree. And Riot is now C tier.
Okay, yeah, low C tier,
Oh,
definitely
C
low.
tier. Okay. It may be a base script interaction, but that's such a niche thing. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Um, the one that we did forget to mark down was, of course, the Acrobat, which has changed character type. So this is basically an entirely new
Yeah,
character. And it used to be that if either of your good living neighbors, I think, were drunk or poisoned, you die as an outsider. Which was borderline townsfolk in some cases. Now they've just decided to lean into the townsfolk aspect of it and make it a townsfolk with the ability that it can choose a player, or it has to choose a player each night, and if that player is drunk or poisoned, it dies. So it's a bit of a hunter.
mhm.
We need to talk about this character as fresh, I think, although it does still have one or two of the same issues that old Acrobat did. Namely, it's a bit too good at finding leech hosts in particular. I think that that's less of a problem than it was, given that it's now a townsfolk and its job is to help the good team. I don't know exactly how high up we're going to put it. I think that it's still going to be capped along with the other characters that can cause, or that tend to cause, multiple night deaths. Probably going to be capped at B tier. Um, so in that range of B to D, I think it's definitely also going to climb out of D. So the only question is it going to be B or C? And I think that it's still a fairly niche character, so I'm inclined to put it in the mid to high C tier. Just because there's not that many use cases for it, but there are still enough use cases that I think it's not it's by no means impossible to build a script where Acrobat is an interesting character. What do you think?
So hear me out. I think it still stays in D tier because it's the fact that it's changed into a townsfolk now doesn't actually change the script requirements to make it a usable character. So previously, in order to make Acrobat Outsider an outsider, you needed to have moving, drunk, and poison. If it was too static, then it became a townsfolk by detecting things like who your leech host does, where the Nodashi is, and that was bad and difficult to write a script around. And it needed variability on night deaths. It needed specifically reasons for there to be multiple night deaths in order to not just hard confirm itself. Even as a townsfolk, it still needs those two things for the same reason. If it's the only thing that causes multiple deaths at night, then it's like way too hard confirmed. Yes, it's better as a townsfolk than it is as an outsider to end up being confirmed, but we still generally try to avoid extremely hard confirmation. And even if something is hard confirmed, there's like an evil ability that can mimic it in some way that needs to be on the script or can otherwise get involved, right? So like a spy could be the one nominating the virgin and is spreading evil misinformation now that they're quote unquote confirmed. On BMR, yes, Professor is a problem, but technically there's Shabalov. Professor is in D tier for a reason. And I think that Acrobat kind of still belongs there, right? You need the moving Droizen as well, because again, yes, it's a townsfolk, but no, you don't want your townsfolk to be able to just find where your Nodashi or your leech host is. It still needs multiple sources of drunkenness and poison, and in particular for those to be able to move around.
Yeah, I think new acrobat with assassin is a fantastic interaction. At least it's true that the acrobat dying partway through the game without its neighbors changing is something that's easier to handle than it used to be. The fact that, like you say, it needs to be paired with other things that can cause multiple night deaths is why I said that we're capping it at B. I get where you're coming from. It's still something that you need to be very careful with. So I think it's got to be C or D. I'll throw this
Yeah,
one.
I mean, for me, the fact that it's now a townsfolk does make some of the interactions a little bit like, okay, it makes more sense now because it's a townsfolk and it's meant to be helping and not hindering its team. But for me, the difference is not actually like it's not actually substantial in terms of how you need to build a script with Acrobat. I think it still actually requires the exact same things on the script as former Acrobat.
I've got a couple of people in chat saying it works okay with like the drunk and the widow. Do you want to comment on that?
Uh, if you have other sources of poisoning, sure, you can mix it with those, but you could always mix it with those as long as you also had enough other sources and some of them were moving. Not all of them need to be moving all the time, but it still needs some amount of moving poison or it's just going to solve things. I don't think it's that good, fun, interesting, balanced to have an acrobat like able to solve immediately potentially who your widow poison is or who your drunk is if those are like the extremely limited things on the script that can cause your drunkenness or poisoning. It can have some static as long as there is something that is also moving.
I think you made a good case. I'm still gonna say that I think it's gonna be a mid to low C, um, just because I think that it's it's now got a few more interesting things that it can do. Um, but like I say, you make a really good case. So, chat, over to you. I think that either of these is entirely fair. Is this ranking based on power or preference? Neither. This is a ranking that is
Neither.
entirely based on how good the character is to build scripts with, specifically to build scripts with. Um, with the two factors that we look into it being, um, is it does it play nice with most characters, or does it have or does it cause problems? And the other side being, does it bring something to scripts that very few characters do? And then making it quite easy to slot in for that reason.
Yeah, so basically, like, how versatile is this? Like, can you just throw this on basically any script and it's not going to have any problem interactions? Or, if when you put it on a script, does it suddenly be like, oh no, actually, that thing is not great with it. That thing's not great with it. Let's pop that off there. And also, interest level, like, not just can I put this on a script, but does this have interesting interactions with other roles? Does it bring something different or unique to the table?
Um, Honestly, D tier will look very sad after this. I mean, the dream is to a completely empty D tier, right? Just to get a whole bunch of updates to all the characters, so it's just minstrel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I
Where do
think
we go
that's finally
next?
all of our characters that have changed abilities since
It
last
is.
we talked about them.
So we can now talk about characters that you and we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Where do we start with this?
That's a good question. We only have one. Actually, you know what? Let's start with our Fabled and Travelers. We do actually
Okay.
have a few Fabled and Travelers on here.
So you had somebody who wanted to talk about the toy maker.
Yeah. So we initially put Toy Maker in the not applicable tier because generally speaking, it is a tool used on teensies to like I think the design intention, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the design intention was if you have like players who are new to the game, but you don't have enough players for a full-sized game, you could use a toy maker to like help help the new players sort of understand how the game generally works by letting the evil team know each other. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it has a slightly different intention though.
Um, I don't know. Never really thought about that. I think it just makes Teensies closer to the normal game. I hadn't really thought about whether it's more convenient for people who are just learning the game to be like, this is how it would normally be. That's an interesting point. I
Acrobat moves to C tier.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that there are scripts that can be built with Toymaker. I think there are cases where you want to look at a script and be like, okay, this could be an interesting Teensyville, but I don't want it to be too quick. Let's put a Toymaker on. I don't know. I
Yeah, and
I
that's
think
basically like the comment that I got that got made to me was basically like there's a case to be made that Toy Maker is like a script building tool and not um not just like this is a tool to help people understand the game or whatever.
yeah, I think last time we talked about Toymaker, I argued for putting it in one of the proper tiers, and you argued against it. So I think this one is up to you really as to whether or not you've changed your mind based off what you've heard.
Um Honestly, I'm still not 100% sure. Like I get that you definitely can write a script with Toymaker in mind, but I don't know if that's like its actual intention, right? But I'm fine putting it in a tier if enough people feel like it can be used that way, then like great. Um, who am I to tell these people that they're doing it wrong? The almanac for it is not actually like entirely clear. The only thing that gives any kind of like hint about its intention is that one of the bullet points in its almanac is something like you can use a toy maker in a game of Trouble Brewing if you have 5 or 6 players, but you don't need to, which is what to me says that like this is largely about if you have newer players who have never really played the game before and you want to help them get an experience that's a little bit more like the game so that they get to know each other. um but like I don't know, it's hard to say, but
Okay. We'll do a short poll. If you think that Toymaker should stay where it is, then let us know. Uh, and if you think it's a script building tool, then we will talk about it again. But now we'll move on real quick to, I think the next one that you had was, well, what was the next one that you had? Next Fable.
Spirit of Ivory.
Do you want to make the case for that one? I can't remember what I said about that last time.
So we put it into not applicable because you really shouldn't be like, okay, so Spirit of Ivory is a tool to limit like multiple evils happening, more than one extra evil player happening. And I still don't think you should be building scripts with using Spirit of Ivory intentionally like that. Its best use is for if you have one alignment character, like for example, a Mazephales, and you have things that can cause character changes to happen, for example, Barber or Pit Hag. This is to prevent a sort of like cycling situation. It can also be potentially a problem with Goon, depending on uh, like what other minion abilities are on the script and what might be able to choose a goon first before they could do something like change his character or whatever. So yeah, I think Spirit of Ivory is still largely a not applicable thing. You aren't really building scripts with it as like a thing in mind because you're probably just making not very good script design. It is a tool to fix a specific problem, uh, to smooth out some interactions that might otherwise cause unfun games, but it's not something that I think you should like intentionally go in and be like, yeah, let's use Spirit of Ivory.
I think that there are very specific niches where you can use it and where I might be tempted to use it. Um, Usually, if I have a bounty hunter on a script that I know is going to change someone first, uh, or a politician on the script who I know is going to change last, then there can be a little bit of a game of chicken for the politician or for the cult leader or for whomever it is, that they can lean into a little bit and be like, is it worth me playing this in a particular way? Do I think there's an extra evil already? Or should I just should I assume that there is? Should I assume that there isn't? That's not always going to be fun for a lot of people, but I do think that there is a script that can be made around it. But I agree that 99 times out of 100, at least, it's going to be a balancing tool.
I mean, is that a good threshold to leave it in the NA tier
I
then?
think it
Or
is, yeah. I think, to be
okay.
honest, I think that like even in the cases where you do use it as a script building tool, it's 9 times out of 10 going to be a bad script at least, because you can't put it with Fangu because that just doesn't work. You can't put it with Ogre because that doesn't work. I suppose you could if Ogre is the one that you want to turn first, but even then, yeah. Um,
Yeah, and you can't put it with most things without just like shutting off somebody else's ability, which is not good.
I think you can put it with. Oh yeah, like the example that I came up with. I didn't build the script. I was thinking of building a script which had Bounty Hunter and Goon and Spirit of Ivory. To be like the Goon can turn evil, but only if there isn't already one, and if there is, then the Goon becomes a source of misinformation. It gives a little bit of
Yeah,
meta
I
info to
mean,
the Goon, if
yeah.
it never turns. But yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a fine use of it. But again, it's largely like here to be a script tool for when you have those kinds of very niche situations and not something that you necessarily want to build around because you're fucking around with alignment changing happening a whole bunch and I don't know. I think that's just not that fun or good. So I think it should stay in the not applicable tier as well.
yeah. People do want to see us talk about the toy maker a bit more, though. I do think that Hallow makes a good point, which is that neither you nor I are prolific Teensyville builders, so maybe we should reach out to some people who are and see if we can get their opinion on it and look at Toy Maker again in part two of
Yeah,
this.
maybe. I mean, I'd be fine to revisit it. Like I've made a handful of teensies. It's not that I haven't written
Yeah,
any teensies at all. I just don't think that Toymaker is like that good of a tool in terms of like I don't know. I don't know. MSS scripts are definitely built around Toymaker. I mean, that's true, but there's also scripts built around Revolutionary. The question is that a gimmick use of the Toymaker or not? And that is kind of a question that needs to be answered here, right? Like again, its almanac entry doesn't really tell us very much about its intentions there, so it can be a little bit hard to read about what the answer to that question is.
I think that we'll adjourn that particular discussion until part two. I think Nation and I will have a chat, see if we can talk to some other people. Emma, Hallow, if you want to reach out to us as well, then we can talk to you about it. If you create a character list using the Teensyville, you may want to use the Toy Maker. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I've read the almanac entry for it. I just don't think that speaks to what its actual intention is, in terms of like is this a tool that is not actually like about the script itself and it's more about the players, or is it a script specifically, or is it a tool specifically about the script? I don't think that actually answers the question very well.
Yeah. Revolutionary gimmicks misuse the revolutionary. That is also usually often true. I think that it's a reasonable difference. We did have most people say they want us to talk about it, and I think shelving it for now is the right decision. It'll stay where it is for
Yeah,
now.
that's fine. Like we can open up for more comments and more readings on a like uh how Toymaker is sort of meant to be used and what its uses are. I'm definitely open to coming back to that. I just think that the almanac itself is not helpful in answering the main question that I personally have.
So if you have an opinion, and you think that it should be ranked, tell us where you think it should be ranked as well. If you are somebody who builds scripts with a toy maker, I would love to hear where you think it should be placed.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too.
So you want to talk
Okay,
about
so we'll
travelers
come
now
back
then?
to that. Yeah, so the first traveler on our list is the Bone Collector.
Okay, yeah, I'll touch on this one because I'm the one who put it there. Um, I think that the Bone Collector being an S tier, I think that the Bone Collector requires a specific cadre of minions that not everything is going to have. It requires it's best when you can have dead demons. I think like in SMV, it works great with Pit Hag and Fangu, so it
Hmm.
can create extra kills. I think it works great with minions that are a little bit less hid, a little bit more hidden. At least not necessarily that they exist, but that who they are. Um, and I think that it requires characters of both particularly Townsfolk and minions who have choices to make. Like it doesn't work as well with more passive characters. I think a lot of the time it's helpful for players to know that they've been bone collected, which you aren't necessarily. Um, there's a few questions about how it works with some characters, in particular Spy and Recluse, which are quite funny. Um, but I think that Bone Collector deserves to be dropped a tier just because I think there are too many instances when I'm building scripts and looking for travelers to put in them. I'm like, Bone Collector doesn't actually work all that great with these minions, so maybe we need to look at other ones. Um,
Hmm.
like
Yeah, no,
one
that's
use of
fair. I
certain
agree.
abilities is
I can agree with that. Yeah. There's a lot of like you start knowing characters that unless your script involves changing alignments or swapping something around, the you start knowing characters are probably not really going to get any new info from being bone collected. Um, so yeah, I agree. We can drop Bone Collector down a tier.
okay. And the next one that we had was the Udon. Do you want to make
Voodoo.
this case? That we had
Uh,
in
where did we put Voodoo? I
Udon
need
we
to find
originally
it
put
first.
in
A tier.
A tier. So were people arguing for higher or lower? Probably lower.
Uh, let me take a peek. That was
Okay,
apparently
you do that while I
in the
move.
Discord.
It was, yeah. I move Bone Collector.
So let me see if I can find exactly what got said about Voodoo, because I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay, I'll also have a look. Okay. Vudon is a pain to script build with, so that's all that we've got. So I think that someone wants Vudon to be moved down a tier. Um,
That sure is what it sounds like.
yeah. Um, what do you think?
Okay. Is Voodoo like what does Voodoo actually work poorly with? Like it's just about whether a player is alive or dead. Um, Nothing about what it has to do with their ability. Do we think maybe it works generally better with things that cause more deaths so that you have more dead players who can actively vote? Like maybe it's not as fun with like slow kill games.
It requires reasons for evil players to be dead. I mean, the only one of those that BMR has is Zombuul.
Yeah.
I guess Goon. Better
Yeah,
with
I don't
multi-kill
actually think BMR
potentials.
has a whole lot of that going on.
Yeah, it is a bit weird for the. There are certainly some characters that you probably don't want to pair with a Vudon. Like, um, if you've got an evil Vudon and a Saint, then your evil Vudon can make a play for it if they survive an exile and just win. Um,
That's true, but I'm not sure that
quite
that
niche.
alone is enough to like that's probably kind of those things are what brought it into A tier and as opposed to like higher, right?
Yeah, I feel like Vudon is a character that I don't tend to put on scripts, but that's just because it's a traveler that I think does generally work quite well. That you can just drop it in at a moment's notice without necessarily doing much special. It's
Yeah.
bad with
Like
Legion,
I
but so are most
definitely
things. Yeah, travelers are not designed to pair with Legion at all.
in general, yeah. I uh I definitely agree that like there are some things that it might work better with. It works better with there's for reasons for evil to be dead. It works better with multi-kills so that you can have more dead players to actually like vote and help move things along. But I don't think it works poorly without those. It's just not quite as interesting. So I actually think it's fine in A tier. I think it's a lot of times you might find that other things are more fun or interesting than a Vudon as a travel, like when you're looking at potential travelers. But that's just kind of maybe the nature of its own character and not like its actual interactions.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think that A is the right place for it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. The icon in S is Deviant. Vudon is an A tier and like from the beginning.
Yeah. Okay, so we're in agreement on that one then. Um, oh, there was one that we didn't mark down that I want to talk about now. That neither of us have marked down while we're on travelers, which is the killing
Okay.
travelers. We said that we would talk about this, but we've currently got gangster, gunslinger, and gnome all in
Mhm.
A tier. I think that they are both. They are all three of them are quite dangerous with a particularly vulnerable evil team, like a demon without much flexibility in where it is.
Okay.
In particular, I tend to, when I'm thinking about these characters, I tend to go, is there potential for a Scarlet Woman? Is there potential for the demon to move? If there isn't, then I'm probably not going to put those on. So,
That's fair.
do they deserve to be B tier or should they stay in A tier? And is there a distinction to be made between the three of them?
I think that there's definitely also questions of how does this work with like roles that can survive through death? So, you know, tea lady protected players, fools, that kind of stuff. And is that actually a positive interaction with these roles or is it not? I think that might be much more subjective and up in the air personally.
Okay, so we've got a couple of different opinions in chat. Gunslinger should be C, Gangster should be in B. Gangster is the least flexible and would deserve to be a tier lower than the others. I'm inclined to agree with Hallow out of these two. I think the fact that the demon sat next to a gangster is just screwed is a bit of an issue, whereas with a gunslinger or a gnome, they can just choose not to vote or nominate.
Right. I'm definitely fine moving all of them down by a tier and then do I think gangster? Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. Gangster not being able to move seats at all and like not being like you only have ever have two players that you can potentially shoot. Whereas Gnome and Gunslinger does involve a certain amount of player agency and they can choose to, you know, not put themselves at risk there. So I'm fine also moving Gangster down a tier below the other ones as well.
Do we think that either gunslinger or gnome make up for it in any way to stay in A, or are we happy with B and C? I think I'm happy with B and C as we have it.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think I'm happy with B and C as well. I think that like I think that the way that these roles might interact with death survivability is perhaps to be considered a script neutral thing, because I think whether it's fun or interesting is going to be an incredibly subjective opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
everything about like whether an interaction is fun or interesting or not kind of is. But I think perhaps this one more so than a lot of other stuff.
Yeah. I think that's a fair summary. Okay. We had plans to talk about whether or not we need to split the A tier, but at this rate, no, we don't, because we are already splitting it into other tiers. Let's see.
Yeah, I don't think we need to. I'm fine. Even if A tier ends up having like the largest amount of characters, I'm fine with that. It's fine. But yes, we are in looking over some of the roles, we are splitting them anyway.
Yeah. What do we want to talk about next then?
Um, okay. So looking at our lists, I think maybe if we go over the outsiders in this episode, and then we save all of the townsfolk, uh, minions, demons that we haven't looked at, we can save that for next episode.
Okay.
I think looking at our outsiders would probably get us about halfway through our list.
Okay. I think that actually that's kind of lines up with what I want to do, which is to talk about Huntsman and Damsel, which is one of the most questioned things that we get.
Okay.
Why is Damsel all the way up in S and Huntsman is all the way down in D?
All right. So, um, to explain the reasoning for anybody who didn't see the initial placement of these characters, the reasoning is basically Damsel can go on basically any script anywhere. It has some not like the best interactions with Grim Peaking roles. Uh, those used to be hard jinxed. I thought that was an interesting form of a hard jinx because this is a player who knows that there's this hard jinx but cannot come out with it or they will lose the game. And oh, to answer the question in chat, the tier list is about script building. So flexibility, how easy can these characters go on scripts, and interest. Does it have interesting interactions or is it just kind of like bland? Um, but anyway, so Damsel, whether you preferred the hard jinx or the jinxes now where the damsel is just poisoned if there ever has been, or a spy comes or widow comes into play, is now poisoned. Is it drunk? Honestly, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. They're drunk. They're droisened. Whether you prefer the old jinx or the new one, I think doesn't really change a whole lot. In terms of the damsel's script flexibility, it can go basically anywhere, and it does not necessarily need a huntsman in the script. The huntsman can be on the script. I personally think that makes it a more interesting dynamic for the damsel, but it's definitely not a necessary interaction. The huntsman, on the other hand, 100% absolutely must have a damsel on the script. It literally cannot go on any script unless there is a damsel there. And that is why it got the lowest tier, because it is completely relying on another character being there, which limits its versatility drastically. So, in terms of looking at Huntsman's tier placement, is the fact that Damsel can go anywhere, does that increase the Huntsman's viability? Because if you can put a damsel anywhere, then anywhere that you do put a damsel, you could also put a huntsman.
In my opinion, yes. I think we were a bit over reluctant, over cautious with where we put the Huntsman originally. And I think that was one of the first arguments that was made to us, and I think that people were right to say that. I think that there's a lot of criticism of Huntsman as a character, that it's a bit of a, it doesn't do a whole lot if, like, it needs to do one thing, particularly with it potentially adding an outsider. I think the fact that it adds an outsider, or that it can add an outsider, even though a lot of people hate it, actually kind of means that is kind of a positive for script building purposes with the definitions that we've used in the past. Um, I think that Huntsman, while Damsel, I think, is in exactly the right place, I think that Huntsman should probably be boosted a couple of tiers into the B tier. What do you think?
Oh, I definitely wouldn't go B tier.
Okay.
Um, I think that so Hallow and Micah have some pretty good points in chat. One is that the huntsman's flexibility is slightly improved by the new jinxes with the spy and widow, because uh with the hard jinxes you had a damsel who was not able to out that. However, a huntsman could always out it. If a huntsman is in play, they know a damsel's in play, and therefore the huntsman knows that there's no spy or widow. They could just out that without having to worry about being damsel picked, because, well, they're not the damsel. So huntsmans were definitely worse with the old jinxes. They are in fact improved because now they can't say for sure whether a spy or widow is in play at all, since they can start in play with a damsel. So I think that's a fair point to its flexibility improving. Micah's point is that there are still actual script building concerns with Huntsman. Not all townsfolk are balanced to turn a damsel into, and that is a script concern. I agree with Micah on that quite strongly, which is that, yeah, the damsel can go anywhere, but can the huntsman? Because you really need to think carefully about what townsfolk role you're going to turn that damsel into should the damsel get picked.
Yes, I just feel like I have never really had a problem fitting Huntsman onto a script. Like, there are issues, sure, and obviously it does require damsel, obviously, but the fact that I've never had an issue with damsel, I've never really had to contort a script. I've never really been in the position where I'm like, oh, I really want a damsel on the script, but I don't like Huntsman here. Um, I get where you're coming from. I think it's B. Do you think it's C or D?
Personally, I would leave it in the D tier because I think that its dependency is the number one thing that for me matters with regards to its versatility. But I could compromise by bringing it into a C tier. I I will fight hard to not put it in B tier.
That's fair. Um,
Molly
I
says I
could.
kind of want to treat damsel and huntsman as like one thing for the list so the dependency isn't an issue. I I I get that, but at the same time, like I do think that damsel is just like it's fine to have a damsel on a script without a huntsman. It's not my personal preference. I think it's often a better dynamic with a huntsman, but I do think that it's incredibly viable of a choice to have a damsel with no huntsman. So I don't think I ever would want to rate them together.
I think we could have solo damsel as an option, and the huntsman represent huntsman and damsel. So, like, how viable is solo damsel? How viable is huntsman and damsel?
Okay, yeah, I think that is actually what Molly is saying.
Okay,
He wants Huntsman to be turned into Huntsman plus Damsel, as opposed to like both of them being the Huntsman plus Damsel pair. Um,
that
that's
causes
fair.
it causes a few other complications because then we have to be like, okay, so the damsel cannot be on a script with huntsman and damsel by definition, and vice versa. So I don't know how we would handle that. I think it's a fair point. I think it's definitely a way that we could have looked at it, but
Yeah, maybe we can think about it more, and we can like revisit that next week. We can talk about it, or not next. I don't know when we're. Is it? I don't know if we're going to do another episode next week or the week after. We'll figure it out. But whenever we do our next episode,
yeah.
um, we can think about potentially reworking that. But for now, I would be fine with moving Huntsman up to C tier, but
Okay,
I'm not going to put it any higher than that because I think the script dependency thing is a pretty major aspect of limitation.
we'll take the compromise option then. Okay, great. Outsiders. Or do we want to talk about King and Quagmire? Or do we want to do that next week? I guess just
We'll
along
do
the
that next
similar
week
line.
since they're both townsfolk.
Yep, sure. What have we got
Right.
next?
Other outsiders. We had a puzzle master is in here.
We do. So yeah, Puzzle Master is one of the ones that I marked down. I find, where did we put it originally? Again, put it
Oh no, wait, that's
in. We
Flower
put it
Girl.
in
I
A
thought that
tier.
I thought in B tier, I saw the like busyness and the sort of like jutted edges of the Flower Girl token,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, hang on, I gotta move closer to my screen to see.
We put Puzzle Master
Yeah, we
in
put it
A
in A
tier.
tier.
I'm going to make the case for S. I think that Puzzle Master is. I think the drunkenness of Puzzle Master is so useful. And I think that drunk being an S means that Puzzle Master should be an S because drunk, in my opinion, has more issues with it while doing something that is absolutely vital to a script that Puzzle Master also does. That I find it hard to justify having Puzzle Master being a tier lower than drunk. I find Puzzle Master both better to script build with and with fewer problems. I'm not going to say no problems because Puzzle Master learning the demon and obviously based depending on what else is on the script, it gives information to an outsider. Puzzle Master is less good with mechanics only rolls, which gives me a bit of hesitation. That's true. There's definitely issues with Puzzle Master finding there's a number of characters that doesn't make sense to Puzzle Drunk that you can kind of have as the drunk. Um, I do take that point, but at the same time, drunk. Maybe I should have put drunk on the list to talk about rather than Puzzle Master because drunk is now a bit more questionable with some of the characters with arbitrary outside account like Zahn, Kazali, and Lord of Typhon.
It's definitely true that we have more of those. So yeah, we can hit up drunk after we finish talking about Puzzle Master.
Yeah, I think we can talk about both of them at the same time. Um, I think that they should be in the same tier, whether that's A or S. I still think it's S, but I don't know. What do you think?
I think for me, one of the differences between them is that if town solves who the drunk is because somebody's mechanical ability failed and them being the drunk is extremely viable, uh, that's probably not the end of the game. If somebody solves who the puzzle drunk is because it's like the only viable option, then it is the end of the game. I think that those are some pretty big differences in terms of where you can slot them into a script.
Uh, okay. Yeah, sure.
But
Um,
actually, if we want to make the case for drunk being lower, because I agree that it's not that great with our arbitrary outsider accounts. We've gotten multiple demons that do that now. And we also have Zahn. I think it's maybe a little bit better with Zahn than the demons, but it's still an arbitrary outsider account. Balloonist also changed to be an arbitrary outsider account as well. So there's a lot more arbitrary outsider account aspects that were not there when we initially put drunk where we did. So I would potentially argue that not only should drunk drop down to A tier, but Puzzle Master should be below it in a high B tier.
I I just find Puzzle Master a really good fit for a lot of scripts. That we do also need to consider that there are limited ways to generate misinformation, and Puzzle Master and Drunk both do that. So it it might score a little bit lower than I thought when I was raising that point on the first question, but on the second question, I think that Drunk and Puzzle Master both still offer a lot.
I agree that they still offer a lot, but I do think that Puzzle Drunk inherently has more limitations than the Drunk does because of the fact that it gets information out of its ability.
Okay. Um, let's put it to a poll then. Wasn't I think, yeah. What's the next thing that we're going to be talking about? I think Puzzle Master is an excellent fit for many scripts and a bad fit for others, which I think is big A tier. Yeah, that's kind of where I land. I think the Puzzle Master, when it's good, it's going to do a lot for your script. But I do take the point that there are scripts where it doesn't work.
All right, so while chat polls on that, you have Sweetheart marked down here.
Yes. Where did we put Sweetheart originally?
Sweetheart is also in A tier.
Also in A tier. I think that Sweetheart is it's such a weird character because it offers you the same misinformation that other characters do, but no, it doesn't. Not really, because usually by the time that a sweetheart is dead, you need
There's
to
very little worth drunking.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that Sweetheart actually requires a much stricter balance of characters than uh, most of the other drunken characters do. So I think that Sweetheart is one that I will be quite tempted to drop a tier because I think you need to be I think you need to have options for the Sweetheart, backups upon backups for the Sweetheart to be drunking. That it does also offer the same benefits as the other two, but only if you build a script well in the first place. Otherwise, you just don't get those benefits.
Chat says you did not start a poll.
I know I didn't start a poll. I was typing the poll while I was talking.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I think Sweetheart is fairly flexible in terms of like what scripts it's fine on. But I agree for Sweetheart in order to like shine, it really does need a lot of things that it could like actively target. Um, if you put it on a script with too many like you start knowings or once per games, then it's not going to have anything at all. Uh, you really need some like strong ongoing information to be able to potentially be alive in the mid to late game where the sweetheart is quite likely to die. So yeah, I think I'm all right dropping it down a tier. Like when I think about building a script, I don't have difficulty putting a sweetheart in. So it's not its versatility or like bad interactions are a problem. It's more that drunk or puzzle master with sweetheart will largely offer a better option a lot of the time, or just getting misinformation from somewhere else because it's very like meh a lot of the time. So I'm fine moving Sweetheart down a tier.
I tried to combine uh, lots of complicated polls into one even more complicated poll. So good luck figuring out what I'm trying to say with that. Um,
Okay, so basically, your first letter is where should Puzzle Master be, and your second letter is where should Drunk be.
yeah. Okay, Sweetheart, we can drop. All right. Other outsiders.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm not currently agreeing with chat in this poll. I really think that with all of the additional arbitrary outsider mod, I don't think Drunk belongs in S tier anymore.
Oh, in that
I think
case,
it's a great
yeah.
character. I think it offers more versatility than the other a lot of other outsiders. But it really does not do great with arbitrary count. Like it's awful with Sentinel for a reason. It's not going to be great with the demons that are doing that for the same reasons.
All right, stop voting for AS, then it's no longer an option. Neither of us think Drunk is S tier, unless I could be tempted to go for both of them in S tier, but neither of us are arguing for Drunk being an S over Puzzle Master.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think Sweetheart is a difficult one just because it's like it's just not causing any problems, but it's also not doing anything like particularly great, which feels very like middle of the road. So I think B tier makes a lot of sense for it.
Okay. I can see that a lot of people still want it to be an A, but I think we're going to go with B. All right, we have one more outsider to talk about. Is that right?
Um, let's see.
Oh no, actually, I think we already talked about the Hatter, so I think we might be done with outsiders.
Yep, we did actually get Hatter earlier when we were talking about Plague Doctor. We hit up Hatter at the same time.
Great. In which case, oh, I love that I've accidentally put monkey in twice, because I used the two different uh, emotes. Okay. Is there anything else we want to cover today?
No, we're hitting up about a 2 hour mark, and we're probably about halfway through our list, which I think is a pretty good stopping point.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, what was the runner up in that poll? BA. Okay.
BA.
And drop both of
By
them.
only one vote, so it's definitely going to remain a potentially contentious
Here's me.
tier positioning.
Here's me arguing to increase the tier level of Puzzle Master, and we've dropped it.
Yeah, who could have predicted that? That was a real turn of events for you.
Well, it is what it is. Okay, I think that we are going to wrap up here then.
Hal is saying put Puzzle Master at the start of B tier. I would like it just to be known that we have never subsorted the tier lists based on like where they are inside of the tier list. So where it's placed in the tier list is kind of, or in its specific tier is meaningless and kind of always
sorted. They are sorted alphabetically until we got to the new characters.
Oh, that's true. They were alphabetical until the new character releases. And now until now, where we're shuffling stuff around.
Yeah. So until Harpy, High Priestess, Plague Doctor, and Summoner, they are all sorted alphabetically.
Yep.
Oh, we haven't put anything in D tier for a while. The newest character in D tier is Engineer.
They purposely focused on releasing some characters that would have like some pretty decent versatility in the like latest rounds of character releases, right? So I think they were fairly successful on that, which is why nothing has really gone into D tier recently.
Yeah, and we are emptying D tier out at a rate of knots. If you think that we've missed anything in the Outsiders or in the Travelers and Fabled, don't hesitate to get in touch. If you have any characters that we might not have considered for townsfolk, minions, and demons, then you can let us know. We've kind of got some characters that we've spoken about, but if you have strong opinions on anything that we've said today, reach out to us. And we will talk about it in a couple of weeks when we come back to this. If you're watching this on YouTube, first of all, thank you very much. There is a whole playlist that this is the fourth part of. I will link that in the description, hopefully. And yeah, there will be, if you're watching this as it comes out, then there will probably not be a part 2 available yet. But if you're watching this in mid 2025 and onwards, then there will probably be both parts available to you now. We're recording this in early February of 2025. So if you're watching this live on Twitch, then we will be back in a couple of weeks, I think, probably to talk about the rest of the characters that we think we need to talk about.
Yeah, and like Leo said, in the meantime, if you have any additional thoughts that may have come up because you've seen this episode or because of something else, then hit us up in our DMs. And also, again, we are looking for people who have written a lot of Teensies and in particular used Toymaker as a script tool rather than as a player tool. Let us know your opinions about that as well, because that's one that we will be revisiting.
Absolutely. If you're watching this live on Twitch, in case you didn't know, it's February now. That is correct. It is currently.
Well, we're only a few days in. Maybe you forgot.
Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah. What even is the time?
An illusion.
Is time even real? Does anyone know?
No.
You run out of time, then where does it go?
The ether.
I'm sure someone out there got that reference. Anyway, let's wrap things up, I guess.
Yeah, all right. Well, you can find me here on Scriptnuts every other Monday-ish. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to finish out our tier list. You can also find me at CTBOTC on Twitch. We stream every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, but we will also be doing a special event tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. So hopefully if you are awake, you can join us there. Demeta and I will be answering some storyteller questions that were put to us as well as ones that come up in chat. So yeah, come join us there.
And here is a preview of that section. Hi, Navian. I'm a storyteller, and I want to give my my players the amnesiac ability. Each night, choose a player. Whoever wins loses. Whoever loses wins. What do you think about this amnesiac ability? How can I improve on it?
Well, you can improve on it by picking just about any other ability.
Thank you very much for your sage advice. And if you want more of that, then you can ask that question and only that question repeatedly in chat, spam it, tonight.
Yeah, we'll definitely entertain that repeatedly.
That will definitely be well worth a watch. If I don't watch it tonight, I will definitely be watching it back. Avian and Demeda are both excellent at what they do. I will be back tomorrow, maybe with some special guests. There will be no JoJo, sadly, but I'll be there. People will be there. We'll have Clock Tower. It'll be fun.
All right, we will catch you again in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Speaking of guest storytellers, shall we go and say hello to Day One Whispers, who have somebody that people might be familiar with currently guest storytelling? Oh, they're supposed to.
Oh yeah, let's
go. They apparently don't. Oh. It says Monday Madness with guest storyteller Chiz, but Evie is very clearly running the game. Let's go see how...
Maybe Chiz ran a different game, or will be running a game. I don't know. We'll find out. Let's raid into them.
Let's ask them.
Just go say hi.
Everybody, tell them... I don't know.
Demand to know where Chiz is.
Let's go and honk at them. Yeah, say where's Chiz. That's the message that we got for you, okay? Where is Chiz? Okay. Bye!
Bye!